I want you to get together.
No, yeah, no, I'll get to that, but just so people think about Christ's thousand-year kingdom, and then reverse engineer actually what he did. He came back to restore the earth, like God told Adam, "Be fruitful and multiply." Okay, Adam was pretty good with that, but then God told him to subdue the earth. Uh, yeah, every creepy, crawly thing, everything that flies. Other words, so the first thing that Christ, when he came back, first off, it says all of the fish in the sea, which was the Mediterranean, was dead. Volcanoes were popping off. That whole part of the world was completely ripped apart. So he had to restore that. It said as in the days of Noah. So there could have been hybrid, there could have been griffins, and there could have been manticores and manitors. We know there were dogmen, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, that's the other thing is why did Christ leave alive, these people that we call the Khazarians that were basically in the Ukraine at the time, and basically he said, look, I'm not gonna harm you, even though you've got the Canaanite bloodline. You're not gonna come up to my house once a year to give, or I'm not going to let you into the house to give during the 1,000-year reign. You can come up and make an offering, but you're not going to enter my house. And that's in Zechariah. But why did he let those people? Why did he let the red-headed giants of the North America exist? He could have wiped them out. He went and he said to them, look, don't be snatching the men creatures. Don't be snatching their women. The dog men, he basically confined to the island, but he let those, and we got, of course, St. Christopher. But when you actually take a look at Christ's 1,000-year reign of what he did, the star forts, the cities, the thousands of buildings, the canals, um, the packing out the oceans. In fact, during the 18th century, there were so many whales, so many that the world literally was able to survive off whale oil. Whale oil was like oil is today for us. And that carried mankind, just that, for 100 years. And in fact, there's stories that they could go to the North Atlantic off the coast of where you're at, Scotland, England. They could throw a net overboard, and one net, they would get as many cod as the boat could carry with one net. I mean, everything was plush, full out. Also, think about during what the millennial reign would look like. It would be about building. It would be about art. It would be about music, architecture, um, agriculture, horticulture, gardens, flowers. You're not talking about a world that we're in right now. If you would have went to Jesus at the time, you were like a saint, and says, "Well, look, Jesus, the saints need some R&R or whatever, so we're thinking about doing, building a stadium where we can kick a ball around, or I got a golf course. We want to spend some time doing golf course, or no, Jesus, we need to put a gym in. I need to be able to work out at a gym 4 times a week. There's no gyms, there was no golf courses or stadiums. This was about honest work. This was about music. This was about higher spiritual things, getting together in these cathedrals, which a lot of people believe they had healing energies to them with the pipe organs and all. This would have been a completely different type of world. It wouldn't have been combustion engines. In fact, some say that what I saw coming out of Arterius, basically, if that was the glory of Christ, which I'm almost sure that's what I saw, that would be the free energy. Maybe that went throughout and created all kinds of energy. But Christ would come, he would subdue the earth, get it from a jungle, and then he would basically put in all of this basically infrastructure. So, and then the other thing, my last point before we get on to actual breaking this down, is that Christ had to build the infrastructure out for those 1,000 years, because just the residual strength of the infrastructure and the church, which later got corrupted into the Catholic Church, I saw one guy on Joe Rogan, and Joe, he was an historian, and he was talking to Joe Rogan about the fall of the Roman Empire. And he goes, you know, what's a funny thing about that? And you can get this clip on Joe Rogan, and it was there's this big, lettered uh, theologian or whatever was talking to Joe Rogan, and he goes, well, the funny thing about the Roman Empire, we don't know quite exactly how it happened so fast, but it seems like the Roman Empire went from an empire to all of a sudden it was converted to this like Holy Roman Catholic Church thing, and it seemed to happen overnight. And if you actually take, and I'll hit the scripture later on, it does talk about the seventh king that was and is not, but then will become the eighth king, will live again. Other words, and so was that the Holy Roman Empire? Were they talking about when I get to that scripture? But yeah, he did mention that just how quick the turnover was. And then one final point about living during the millennial reign. Just think about you as a person. There would be a law. Look, if a person needs work, um, he can come and show up to any building and put him to work. We'll pay him 2 silver coins for a day's wage or whatever. It would be hard work. It would be worship. It would be think about people how they would be 100% effective and efficient. They would be doing their purpose in life. Think about living during the reign of Christ, and you're 30 years old, Paul, and you're thinking, what do I really need to do? And then you would go to somebody that would be like a spiritual elder or a saint, and you're saying, what is it? And he goes, well, no, I can see your aura. I can see your purpose of God, what you should be doing. You should be building such and such, or you should be putting together this particular worship program, or this is what you're really good at. You're really good at, etching words in scripture. You have a knack for it, or you got a knack for gardening, or you got a knack for uh, husbandry, working with animals. In other words, people would have been their most efficient during that 1,000-year reign. So think about you, Paul, and your efficiency right now, times that by 10 or maybe 100. That's how much more effective and efficient. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, if I only did have a staff of 10 people. Oh, boy, that's all I would need.
I'm
But it,
exhausted. Yeah, I'm actually exhausted with the thing. I'm about to publish a book as well, and I'm working on that as well as all this. And yeah, I am limited in my capacity. I can tell you that much. But if I had a new body where my knees weren't giving out and I wasn't starting to get arthritis in my fingers, I could probably get a lot more done. You know, but yeah, you can imagine just how glorious that kingdom would have been, and just what these people who lived during that time would have been capable of, with nothing holding them back anymore, and no Satan around to hinder people, fill their mind with thoughts that are inappropriate or distractions. You know, it's kind of full. You know, no need, free energy everywhere. Quite literally, we know the buildings had all these free energy devices on them, and people argue, well, Christ's kingdom isn't a physical kingdom, it's one in heaven. And yes, there is a heavenly kingdom of Christ that's eternal, absolutely. But there's also a temporary 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth too, a physical one. And that would look something like what we see on all these glorious buildings. And I think they've been defaced since then. I think things have been added to them which weren't originally there. Demonic iconography, a takeover, like when a warring nation invades another nation, the first thing they do is put their own flags on buildings and claim it as their own, and then they start the campaign of rewriting history, don't they? Because it's written by the winners, and then they claim it as their own, and then they start removing the old iconography and putting up their own portraits, And these are the type of things that probably happen to these buildings. And people would say, like, oh, Christ wouldn't make mankind build buildings. It's kind of, well, humans, people on Earth, need roofs over their heads. We still have these needs as much as heaven exists and our Father is a heavenly Father. We're not. We're fleshly beings who need basic creature comforts to survive, like heat and water and four walls and a roof, the basics. Why wouldn't Christ build those for us? Just because it's not in his nature that that he doesn't need these things, but he knows we do. So yeah, I think it's well within the realms of possibility that this is probably how it went down, and people were really enjoying your little rant there in the chat. I saw you were going with it there. You were rolling with all the connections. Just keep going. Keep
Oh
going
yeah,
off your
well
ideas.
no,
You know.
yeah, okay. So we work backwards. So now we know. Other words, we know what Jesus. We got our head in the game. Okay, that's what he did. He wanted to build out the infrastructure to save these billions of people. That once they came up and Satan was released, they got duality. They're going to get a chance to get saved. So where's the evidence for uh, this 1,000-year reign of Christ? And when you actually take a look around, it is literally everywhere. I talked about the bread baskets. A lot
Mhm.
of people don't know over 300,000 miles of railroad tracks were supposedly built between the 1800 and 1870. Of course, the breadbasket, the plains there, walls. Here's one. Here's one you're really gonna like, Paul. So I couldn't understand why all of the walls, and why do some places don't have walls? What is it about so many walls? And when you take a look at the old world, walls everywhere, cities, high walls like Constantinople or Istanbul.
Mm.
That was the seat of the Eastern Roman Church. Their walls for hundreds of years. It took all went to I think the 11th century before the Muslims could actually take that city, and it's only because people left the daggone gates open. But walls, nothing has saved the lives of more men than walls. When I take a look, and I've been going throughout looking at all of the history of the Crusades and the Muslims, and this king taking this king, and then this guy trying to take this city, and it's always a siege. It's always men come together, and then there's walls that separate them. They settle into a siege, and they sit there. Not so when it's open battle. When
Mm.
it's open battle, like uh, for instance, our Civil War, when guys are just meeting on the field, men liquidate each other really quick. So
Mm.
throughout all of history, all these armies are going back and forth, everybody trying to snatch another kingdom, another city, but the walls stop them. But what does it also stop? It stops the death of men. It causes men to actually live longer. Walls is probably the greatest invention that has saved more men than any other architecture in the world. And then you got to ask, well, why didn't North America have all these walls? Well, there were a lot of walls, but could Christ in his wisdom knew that once his 1,000-year kingdom was over, that there would be a die-off in North America, or maybe a depopulation to where um, that what would happen in North America wouldn't come for another 1,000 years or hundreds of years later. And that's why you don't see New York City has walls, whereas you see in Amsterdam. In fact, star forts, literally hundreds and hundreds. I think Arlucis, there's some YouTuber, I can't say his name. I'm dyslexic. I flip things around. Anyways, he's got a YouTube, and he goes through where all the star forts are. Absolutely incredible. And a lot of these were the actual seeds of the city, like in the Netherlands and Amsterdam and uh, uh, Brussels. You should have seen the Star Fort of Brussels, and the paintings
Mm.
of Brussels before it was bombarded.
Mm.
But and then also, so we're just talking about the evidence. Um, there's this one company. It's called the Detroit Publishing Company. And as soon as the camera came into being, which was right around 1826, when we first got the first images, and by about 1840, you could take portraits. People could sit down. By 1850, you could actually take photographs of large landscapes and cities, and that's where you get it. Anyways, it's the Detroit Publishing Company. They did literally hundreds of thousands of photos. That's what their bailiwick was. They went all throughout the Midwest, taking landscape pictures of San Francisco, and everything. Well, um, from the 18th to 19th century, all the way up to 1920, And then all of a sudden, all of those pictures, in which you can still find some of them, they're in postcards. You'll see like postcards, like, old uh, governor's mansions of Iowa and stuff, which are just like, or old um, uh, mental institutions or prisons,
Mm.
incredible towering wall type structures. All of those pictures, the, the government came in and bought them up, the Library of Congress. So literally hundreds of thousands of old world building pictures that this company went all over the world to take, and in America, gone. Um, but so, um, anyways, I could go into a lot of what the build out, all the evidence for the build out um, was the mud flood, and there's so many of them.
Mm.
Just the evidences of it. By the way, the language for 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years, was actually Latin. Every nation uh, has a what you would call a Sabbath in it. Latin does seem to be the origins of a lot of different languages. Even in Thailand, China, you'll find characters and stuff like that. Latin was the language of the Magna Carta. It was used all the way up to um, the 12th century. In fact, the Magna Carta, I think, was written in Latin. Uh, but I got I got a lot of notes here, but I don't want to go spend too much time on all the evidences because there's just so many that all somebody has to do is just look. I mean, I can go through them. So I'm going to hit the next thing, um, and this gets into the release. So we've had Christ's kingdom. He's built it out. All the evidences are there. You could look backwards. If you would just go and look, you can see what we're talking about. There's no way that there was a period of time in which it would have had to have been 1,000 years of peace and prosperity and goodness for to be able to build a world out that basically has been bombed, ripped apart. In fact, um, let me go into Satan's little. Now
Yeah.
Satan is Satan is released from the pit,
Mm.
and so now the 1,000 years is over. I believe the New Jerusalem has actually moved over. In fact, somebody has actually done a map. If New Jerusalem was 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles tall or whatever, he overlaid it over the North Pole. And then he goes, well, maybe they're talking about 375 miles long, wide, high. And then that would actually go right over the center of the North Pole. Maybe it's cloaked. Maybe it's been pulled up above the North Pole a couple of dimensions.
Mm.
So we can't see it. But, anyways, so that went, the 1,000 years was over. Now we get into Satan's little kingdom in which he is released. And by the way, it doesn't say little season, it actually says time. And then I went into the season of man where, okay, and now see, I'm one, Paul, that believes that this is what I believe. 70 AD, 1,000 year reign, which would be 1070 AD, when Satan was released and he came up to the plane of the earth and saw the whole place built out. He said to himself, you know what? I am just going to cancel that 1,000 year reign of Christ. I'm going to act like it never even happened. I am going to infiltrate the church. I'm going to sweep up and snatch up all the books. I am going to actually start wars. And I'm actually going to restart because it's very believable that this could be a continuation of the Roman Empire. The buildings aren't that high tech. There's no cars running around. There's no factories spitting out rubber and black smoke. I think I can make this work. I think I can just say that 1,000 years reign never happened and convince enough of these men creatures along with my secret societies, deceive them, infiltrate, in which I can just pick the whole thing back up and just act like it's a continuation of the Roman Empire, except now it's the Holy Roman Catholic Church, in which I will infiltrate and then I will take. And the residual strength of Christ Church. That's what I will basically take. So it could very well be, it's been 2,000 years. Um, um, and then here's something for people to understand about Satan. Anyways, Satan says, I will ascend to the heights of the clouds, height of the clouds, above the throne, basically the throne of God, but you will not. You'll be thrown down into the pit. And it's very interesting, this scripture, and this is Isaiah 14, chapter 14, verse 14, 17. Very telling about the nature of Satan. And so he's in the pit, and people are coming by and looking him, and they're saying looking upon Lucifer, Satan, is this the one that caused the earth to tremble, that shaked kingdoms, and made the world a wilderness, and destroyed the cities of the earth? He's a destroyer. So as soon as Satan was released, what did he come to do? Kill, steal, destroy. I mean, he went nuts. And so I believe when he came up, I think one of the first things he did is that he goes, you know what? I'm going to go check with my buddy, the ice giants in Antarctica. You know, Thor, Yeshua, is in the north. I'm going to go check with the ice giants in Antarctica that maybe have been kept out of Christ's kingdom. And so he went there, and they said, hey, Satan, we got some really cool tech. We got this one flying machine. We figured out how Christ can use free energy. And it was this particular machine. This can burn and bomb and rip up cities. You're going to love this machine, this particular construct. And so we now know, all based off the maps, we know Siberia was completely built out. In fact, the Siberia, that part of the Russia, in fact, if you take a look at some of these maps, Africa, South America, even in Antarctica, cities after city, everything was built out. Absolutely incredible. The first thing he goes, where did those 10 lost tribes of Israel, where did they spend their 1,000 years? Oh, that's Siberia. You ought to see a place like that. In fact, Marco Polo, he went to that part of Mongolia. And when he met the Khan, which means king or ruler, he goes, there's this one city that had like 10,000 bridges in it. He says it was the most glorious city. Anyways, we now know, looking at the map of what happened to Siberia, Satan ripped that place to pieces. I'm talking about 2,000-mile bombing campaign, lakes, 5-10 miles, all circular in circumference. Some of the lakes as much as 50. I don't know if he had the technology to. In fact, I started looking up the worst volcanoes or the worst super volcanoes. The 5 top super volcanoes that went off. Guess which was the worst one in history, Paul?
Surprise me. Go on.
Siberia. I mean, this thing was massive. I mean, this was like a 500-mile crater that blew out. I mean, it was like incredible. And so if you think about, and here gets into the next big revelation I had, the war of Gog and Magog was actually, if you take a look at the old maps, Paul, it's right there in that part of Russia. You can actually see where it says Gog and Magog. In fact, the Great Wall of China, the first name that it was given, which I believe it was a building project by our Messiah. I think the saints came to him and says, Lord, we got these Mongolians that like roam around on the land, and we got all these Chinese, and they just can't stop fighting. And I'm sure Jesus said, well, who's the political leadership? Let's get them. And I'm sure the saints said, no, you don't understand. These Mongolians and these Chinese, they don't have like leadership. They just they're like groups, and they wander and stuff, and they're just like stealing each other's wives and stuff. And we gotta bring peace to these people. It's not like a political structure. I think Jesus came up with, well, let's both pay them as a public works project to build a nice long wall. Both of them can build. They can get to know each other. Each one of them can make a couple of shekels of silver a day. keeps peace. And when the thing is done, the wall is separating them, and we got them separated. And so could have been something like that. But the wall, the Great Wall of China, was first called the Wall of Gog and Magog.
Hmm.
And so I believe now that as soon as Satan was released and he went and visited those ice giants in Antarctica and got that technology, whatever flying machine, directed energy weapon, which could rip up cities, we've seen them. We've seen 500 square block of San Francisco completely razed. People say, well, it's fire. Wait a minute. How does fire raise 500 blocks of beautiful, incredible buildings and just like vaporize them? How does that work?
Mhm.
And so I believe that's when the actual war of Gog and Magog started, which is now, Paul. We've been in this war for a couple thousand years, basically. Um, and so, yeah, this special age of grace in which we're released.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other thing that I think Satan, when he got released and he went to see his fellow demon ice giants or whatever in Antarctica, they'll say, well, the rumor is that Christ built this place out, and the reason why he did it. And we hear from some of the serpent seed line that which was also in Hades for whatever reason. Jesus seemed to have made it carte blanche because these people are being born now. These secret societies were all the way back, even in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The Khazarian Empire was a real empire. You know, some people call it by another name in the Middle East, but the fact of the matter is, they did live in the Ukraine. And maybe the curse was taken off this Canaanite bloodline. And maybe Christ told these Khazarians, look, you got the Ukraine. I'll tell you what, I'll let you be the reapers and harvesters of the breadbasket of the earth. Just don't go stealing and killing and doing all the rest of that stuff that you do. Of course, once he left, that's the first thing that serpent seed line went back to, is
Hmm.
basically killing, robbing, raping, all the rest. But my point is that um, I think he was told, look, our information is that when Jesus went down to Hades, he made this crazy promise to all these people down there that they're all going to get a straight up second chance, that each one was going to give a chance to live, to be conscious, to get to the point to where they would have a chance to accept by faith of salvation through Jesus Christ as a way back to God. And I'm sure Satan said, what? He goes, yeah, he released them all the ones you captured. He's now going to release them. And he's promised them all, they're all going to get a chance to live long enough to get it, to accept them, to accept the gospel. And I'm sure Satan says, well, is that right? So they're all supposed to get a chance. Well, well, well. Have I got abortions for them? They're not even going to get a chance. I got nothing but wars. I got nothing but fake Islamic religions. I got Taoism. In fact, you're going to find out about Buddhism. It's not that old. You're going to find out about Chinese kingdoms. They're not that old. You're going to find out Hinduism was actually a corruption. You're going to find out all of a sudden there's all kinds of strategies that he employed that once he was released. But the biggest thing is don't let them live long enough, or at least in a culture to where they can actually get a chance to get saved. I'm not going to lose them again. I
Hmm.
got them one time. I'm going to keep them. So go ahead, Paul, before I jump into the next little bit.
Yeah, again, you paint a very colourful picture, and I'm enjoying this level of theorizing and speculating. This is exactly what I got into the game for, to be honest, because I love this kind of stuff. And yeah, I imagine that's exactly how Satan would have reacted once he heard the news, the good news, for us, and bad news for him type of situation. That all of his hard work was completely undone. And now he has to kind of start from scratch and do it all over again. If you look at the evidences on the earth for complete and total destruction, I mean, first of all, I'm sure Armageddon was pretty destructive. We can equate a lot of the destruction we see of like melted buildings, for example, and mountain ranges that were clearly once castles or something. We can equate a lot of that to the Armageddon and the judgment of God and Jesus and during the tribulation time. I mean, we even have evidences, Joe, showing that the seven churches that Jesus was explaining the judgment's going to come to them. We can show evidences that these churches are razed to the ground. Their judgment came. Prophecies were already fulfilled, and But a lot of people say they're still waiting for that, but there's no evidence. Is the evidence is there that those churches were destroyed? So first of all, I think, like I said, there was a leveling of the old world, a building of a brand new, perfect infrastructure world for billions of people to live in, due to this promise Christ made to people in Sheol that you'll be resurrected and given a chance. And yeah, when I'm sure from Satan's point of view, it may have been a blink of an eye when he was cast away, and he probably was brought back into a world bewildered, like I've been gone for a minute and everything's changed. What's going on here? Everything I've worked for has been completely undone, and yeah, and I can see it going on exactly how you've said. And if you look at Siberia, and I made an episode about this, but yeah, Siberia is just the northern hemisphere of that huge swath of land. It's a wasteland. It's been utterly decimated. It looks like you said, it's been carpet bombed for 2,000 miles straight, and it's just holes after hole after hole after hole after hole, just filled with water, hundreds and thousands, and just an unprecedented amount of craters up there. It's been annihilated, utterly wiped off the face of the earth. But you look at these old maps, which supposedly aren't even that old, which maybe a few hundred years old. That place is fully populated. And it shows like little buildings and kingdoms and churches painted on these old maps that fill this whole northern Siberian area out, from the tip all the way up to Alaska, all the way across to where Russia is. It's kitted out with civilization on all these old maps. Where did that go? It's just gone. Just look at Google Maps and you'll see there's nothing there. It's complete and total tundra. It's wasteland.
Yeah,
And that alone is a testament that something happened not that long ago, like very recently. And then that isn't even to talk about the civil wars, the wars in Europe, the wars in America. Brother against brother, just nation against nation, king against king. World War I, World War II, the destruction of Dresden and all of European beauty just destroyed in carpet bomb raids. The war has been non-stop.
that's right.
You
That's
know.
that's the point. The point is the war of Gog and Magog happened right after, and so this is where I disagree with pretty much the rest of the millennial reign. Of course, I'm not a YouTuber. I just do radio once in a while over at Revolution Radio, and even then, I'm like a rock skipping once in a while. It's got to be something really important for me to get back on the radio. So I'm kind of, like you say, semi-retired. But I will extend this to you, Paul. If people do support you and they want another session, in a couple of weeks or whatever, just give me a ring. Anything that I can do to help. In fact, I just want to say right now, I've been in talk radio for 15 years. I've been on the political front line of politics over 35 years as a not a consultant, more of as a hijacker or as a gunslinger. I was an ideologue, a free agent ideologue. But anyways, but the point is that I've seen a lot of guys like you, Paul, both in the alternative media, political realm, as well as really smart guys, And then I've seen the YouTubers as well, and I can tell right now I've seen hundreds come and go, and the reason why they come and go is nobody supports them. And I just want to encourage you to support Paul. I mean, he's doing this, it's taking his time. And so anything that you can do to help him, I'm set myself. I'm actually in my mid 60s, and I got an organic farm. There's nothing you can do, but if you wanted to do something for me, give it to Paul. Send Paul a love gift, whatever, subscribe, however. But what was my point, Paul? You were just talking about something. Oh, the other thing is that the war of Gog and Magog. Oh, about doing a session. So if you got people that want me to come back and you're giving you some support, just let me know. Give me a ring. Maybe we'll do a session 3 or whatever.
Sure.
But so this is where I disagree with you and the rest of the community the millennial reign of community.
Go on.
This is the timeline. And this is what's going to give you guys a lot of trouble, because most of you have settled in that Satan's short season has actually started right around, some people say the 1500s, some people say the 1700s. I'm saying no. So Satan is released. All right, we got the map of the Tartarian, greater Tartarian map. In other words, worldwide, Africa, all of it. We can see all that. That was in about I-230. In fact, I'm going to come to it in my notes on this timeline. And so it didn't happen much after that. Now, we know Satan, when he comes back, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Nothing but wars, which has happened since he's been released. We can go back 2,000 years, let's just say. All right. This is what I believe. And then also he changes times, dates, seasons. Yeah. That's his other calling card. That's his other big calling card. And then one other thing that you brought up about people believing that, oh, no, the 1,000-year reign of Christ has not come yet. We're waiting for the book of Revelations to be fulfilled. And then Christ is going to come back. He's going to clean up the earth and right it. They're going to have this 1,000 years. Think about it. It would take Christ, even Christ himself, 1,000 years to clean up the polluted soil, water, nuclear power plants, the trashed up oceans that's got plastic the size of Texas floating in it off the coast of Hawaii, all the dirty water, all the dumps, the radioactive, the nuclear power plants. Think about it. It would take them 1,000 years just to clean this place up. We have trashed this place so bad. I mean, it's like you can't, even in the Northwest now, you think, oh, I can go back to the mountains and I can drink. Yeah, I'm close enough. I'm in the foothills. Maybe if I went over a mountain range or a set of the hills, I could probably drink out of the water. That would be okay. But every place else on the world, bad water. They've sprayed the skies. The soils are trashed up with aluminum baronate. In order for Christ and his 1,000-year kingdom to come back and clean this world up, it would take them 1,000 years just to clean it up, just the dumps alone. But anyways, let's get to the timelines, because this is my timeline, Paul. 1,000 years came, Satan was released. He said to himself, you know what? I can make this work. I can make them I'll infiltrate the Catholic Church. It'll be the Holy Roman Catholic Church. I can get in it. I can make people think that these buildings were built by the Romans and the Greeks and the Greco-Roman and, you know, the pyramid and the Parthenon of Greek. I can sell it. I can get it. I can infiltrate the church. I've got my secret society set up. And so I'm going to cancel that 2,000 years like it's never. And then I'm going to pick it up from there. And so then you start to get into the actual real timelines of what they tell us. And here they are. So first off, you've got the church fathers, supposedly 160 AD to 350 type AD, all of the big church fathers. And I can go through the names: Hippopotamus, Hippos, Origen. With almost all of them acknowledge that the 1,000-year reign of Christ had come and gone. What happened after Satan was released? There was some kind of worldwide rocking event that knocked the whole earth back and caused devastation everywhere. It took a couple hundred years for mankind and civilization to actually get back on their feet after that 1,000-year reign. So something happened. So for 100, 200 years, they were knocked back. But then when they finally started to pull themselves together and they started thinking, and then the church fathers started writing what doctrines are, then they says, you know what? We've been so devastated. We got to collect up. What did the scripture say? And what did Peter say? And who Paul wrote these epistles? We need to pull these together. And so the church fathers were part of those that were putting that all together, although they all acknowledged. Then we get to the timelines. The Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. And that's where all of the Christians and the church, and even the ones that had infiltrated, says, yeah, Christ's kingdom has just we're just starting into it. It's AD 160, or it's AD 325, or or everything's with an I, an X, or a J
Hmm.
before that. Even the maps, even our Tatarian map of Siberia that you saw, that's I 290, I think it is. I'll hit up my notes. So the Council of Nicaea, then, so they're pulling all the information together. They're getting the canon and everything else. They're getting New Testament together. And then 393 AD, they approve the canon. And so finally the Christians got back on their feet after this devastation, whatever. And so now they're getting along uh, 93 AD. But this is the timeline. This is what they tell us. And then in 260, which is about 100 or so years before that, maybe, yeah, 100 or so, we had the plague of Rome. And then 410, this is what we're told, 410 AD, we had the fall of Rome by the Huns and the Visigoths
Hmm.
and the artilleries or whatever. That's what we're told. And then we're told 429 to 530 had the plague of Justin, the pandemic, which affected the whole known world. A lot of people died in that. And then, of course, I talked about right after the 1,000-year reign, the earth was ripped up, but there was also a plague, supposedly at 166 to 180. That was a
Hmm.
plague. Um, um, and then we get into now, here's something that's interesting. They say the Great Wall of China was started to be built 246 BC to 620 AD, or it took 1,866 years. Well, this guy, this Russian mathematician, and I'll get to his little card, he goes, oh, that's a bunch of crap. Took 1,800 years to build that wall. In fact, he goes on to say it's the Jesuits in the 15th and the Catholics. He says the Jesuits and the Catholics have doctored and changed all historical documents and data for the last 900 years. He says they had whole offices set up in which these Jesuits and these Catholics went back throughout the last 1,000 years, just changing everything. But anyway, so you got that wall, okay, and of course you got the worst year supposedly in history, which was 536 to
Hmm.
542. So what I'm painting a picture, Paul, is that not 50 or 60 years goes by in which things aren't breaking down. There's not a plague. There's
Hmm.
not. We're. In other words, we're into the season of Satan. This war of Gog and Magog, it's taking lots of different forms. Of course, 1066, we finally get the banking. Then we get the first open secret society. 1099, the Knights Templar. All right. Now, supposedly, they tell us that Islam came along about 573, 573, I think. No, 570. Muhammad was born. And then by 622, Muhammad established Medina. And now we're finding out Medina is not on any of the maps until about the 8th century. Muhammad is not even mentioned until the writings of these Islamic scholars in the 8th century. In fact, the coins that actually say Muhammad, which means the chosen one or the blessed one, it's actually a name. Muhammad is actually a name, came out of the Middle East. These minted coins, and they were uh, they were also close in the 7th and 8th century. These couple of coins. Well, guess what they show? They show Muhammad, and he's holding a staff, and on either side of him, crosses with
Hmm.
Islamic writing. So the actual first coins of Muhammad, or that would become the Islamic Empire, it got crosses all over them, front and back. It's absolutely unbelievable. So, anyways, but that would be what Satan would do after the devastation. Figure right around 600 AD. Let's give them another religion, which some people are now saying that Islam, the 5 prayers a day, was actually because the Catholic Church was corrupting true Christianity, and that Islam was actually an offshoot of true Christianity to reform it, to bring it back to the days on how it was during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Why can't we pray 5 times a day with all the bells and everything else, which, by the way, bells were everywhere? Then they outlawed those in the 1800s. You can see miles and miles of nothing but bells. It seems like when you heard the bell, that was time to actually stop, to center yourself in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and to worship like the Muslims do now, which would be, I'd like to see it as a great practice. Too bad Christianity is not like that, where, you stop 5 times a day and you go, wait a minute, what am I living for? Maybe I do need to break a little prayer rug and pray. So maybe Islam was a reform of it, and then the Mohammedans, they say, took it over. Lots of evidence for that. Okay, then you had the Knights Templar, and they really got going 1119 to year 1300, 1307. And they were like the first one of the secret societies, and they really got going. And now we know a little bit about them. And of course, we had the Crusades. It's give or take 1095 to they stopped right about the 15th century. And in fact, that's where I found out that walls work. When I realized all of the wars, when I went through all the wars in the first 1,000 years, from the year first century to the year 1,000, all of the wars and the walls. Okay, then we get to another guy that pops up. So you got the Crusades around the 11th century that were just like massive wars between the Moors and Muslims or whatever. And what were they fighting over? They all got tricked. They thought New Jerusalem, or they thought Jerusalem was in the Holy Land. No, Jerusalem was at the North Pole. Tricked all these Christians into believing we got to fight for the holy Jerusalem, when no, that place was cursed. That was left. That was gone. And all of a sudden we got tricked into believing, we got to fight, keep back the Muslims to keep them from the Holy Land, New Jerusalem, when New Jerusalem was got us to fight over daggone dirt. Unbelievable. But then we had the rise of Genghis Khan. And all of a sudden, this guy pops up 1162. So think about it. We had the Tartarian map at I-290. Something happened to where that was basically wiped out. But then we got, and so hundreds of years goes by in which this guy, Genghis Khan, and these Mongols, after the devastation, think about it, that Siberia got devastated. They weren't walking around in nice cities anymore. You had large groups of people. They were now almost 1,000 years away from the actual 1,000-year reign of Christ. The cities in the north like that were devastated. They were wandering, hordes of them, called Genghis Khan. And then, so after 1,000 years, you take a look at the Tartarian maps, then the vast horde of Genghis Khan invades Europe. And then we got all those wars from 1862 to 1227, and then all of the Khans after that, all of his family, wars in China. There was no empire in China. In fact, Genghis Khan actually pulled together the Chinese as little as 1,000 years ago, where they were actually able to form their first. So I'm painting a picture, Paul, that no, the little season of Satan actually started right after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. There was a bump 200-300 years, world was devastated, and then they picked it up, and then they tried to cover it up by putting all these fake dates, saying it's 1234, the first coin that was minted, or 1204 out of Denmark, which had a mitre on one side, it was a gold coin, and a crown on the other. And so Satan was actually trying to trick us with the dating. He was actually trying to trick us with the money, the dating of the books, the maps, all of it. If you actually take a look at it, it's actually I and J. So, but they were trying to make us think, this is the year of our Lord, 1234. No, it was actually the year of Yeshishus, or Isis, or not Isis, 234. So anyways, we had Genghis Khan, the religious wars, which, by the way, you actually take a look, and here's the residual effects. This is the power, the residual effects of Christ's church during this 1,000-year reign. Absolutely incredible. Not only did it carry through, not only to the Catholic Church, and to spread all, all over the world. But Genghis Khan, this is what his faith was, Paul.
Hmm.
This is real close to Christianity. Genghis Khan and those people, they believed in a sky father who was a universal judge. He was eternal and supreme. And if you broke the laws of the universe, then he would cause the Sky Father would cause chaos and judgment, and that he would send a person on the earth to extract basically judgment for doing wrong. Genghis Khan basically was reciting our construct of our of Christianity about a father eternal, and that ultimately he sends somebody that would evoke judgment. So then we keep on going, Paul. Now we're up to something really strange. It gets stranger. Have you heard of the Ice Age, the Little Ice Age?
Mm-hmm.
The Little Ice Age happened in the 13th century.
Yeah, the rings on trees show that there was something happening around that time. Yeah, there's evidences through that to say it seems like everything was terrible during that period of time again. I've always equated, the worst year in history, the 536, to be the same event. But they've separated obviously by about 800 years or so by the official records. But
Yeah,
I think it's the same event personally.
yeah, and that's why, even though I'm reading off the conventional timeline of what the other people tell us,
Hmm.
there was a conventional timeline history tells you, I'm believing like you that it's jumbled.
Yeah.
536 to 537, who knows? That could have been right after the 1,000-year reign of Christ that all hell broke loose, because Satan does change times and seasons or whatever. But this little ice age happened in the 13th year. And that's when I believe, because we now know that we have the maps of the cities in Antarctica and all the rest. I believe that's when the earth was actually frozen. Uh, and that's when the Arctic was actually frozen.
Hmm.
So that's something else we've been lying about. That's what, in fact, there was three other ice ages. And so, um, yeah. And then we got other weird things like the Tartarian Empire. They decided to attack Japan, to conquer Japan in 1380,
Hmm.
and they say they ended up crashing into Peru, and that's why they built out all the glorious buildings and everything in Peru, which I don't believe that at all. And then we had another big bump in the road, 1346, the bubonic plague.
Mm-hmm.
That hit us. That really knocked us back. That was called the Black Death, and it happened a couple of places. I mean, it happened a couple of periods of time, but the main one that like wiped out 50 million dead in Europe was 1346 to 1353.
Hmm.
And then we get to um, uh, oh, so this guy was king of Russia, and his name was Muhammad II, in 1475. But he wasn't Muslim. Um, but he viewed Islam as an offshoot of Nestorian Christianity, which was
Hmm.
it was an offshoot of 1400 AD. So to believe that actually Islam was actually an offshoot of Christianity is something else. Also, China and the Qing, Ching, that's when the first Chinese empire came into being, 645. So all that was long. By the way, the writings about Siddhartha and Buddha, 500 AD,
Hmm.
before that showed up. Just lies everywhere. We're finding out that all of our timeline's crazy. Okay, so the next thing, then we get into the 15th century, then all the secret societies, which, by the way, there was a secret society, and I will hit this here in a minute, that actually did um, manuscripts. Scalloway, I'll have to get his name, but the Jesuits had whole thousands of people working on old world manuscripts, historical documents, and like this Russian mathematician. I'll find his card here in a minute. He goes back and he goes, they just made it up all the
Yeah, it's
last 900 years.
Anatoly Fomenko.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the guy. He says they made it all up. He went back and did his own timeline. Did you know there wasn't even a written language in Russia until like the 8th century? So, but here's another one. 1793, France throws out the church, Christianity, basically start killing the Huguenots. I mean, you start to get all of the killing. Um, um, and then let me just check here. Oh, I will hit this, although this is a little later, and then I am getting close to the wrapping it up. But well, there's still 15 minutes or so, maybe a little more. So
Keep going.
the big orphan trains that everybody see. What I'm trying to do, Paul, I'm being very mischievous, say the word,
Mischievous.
mischievous, right? It's because I'm trying to knock you. Well, I'm trying to create a civil war among us, the 1,000-year millennium, because a lot of you guys believe that it just happened in the last couple hundred years, and I'm
Well,
saying,
I'll stop you right there. First of all, I don't have a timeline personally. I listen, but I've heard quite a lot of differing opinions. I quite often say the 1776 thing just because it's something people can pull on as an example. Okay, let's say it was 250 years ago, for example, in 1776. But from what I've gathered and looked into, I don't think the timeline we can go off is at all accurate in any way, shape, or form. I don't think we actually know how long it's been since Christ's death and resurrection. You know, we say 2,000 years. It could have been 1,000 years ago. It could have been maybe, I don't know, 1,300 years ago.
yeah, but
It's
here's the problem, Paul. If you go off the 250 timeline, like 1750, which by
yeah,
the way, I'm going to get into that because that is important because that is when an off the whole world, that was literally the first world war that actually started in 1750.
yeah.
But if you go, you got to believe that Islam then came about because if Christ's kingdom was over around the
Hmm.
15th, 16th, then that means all of Islam had to come in the
Yeah.
last couple hundred years. That
The
means
only
Genghis Khan. That means all these Black Deaths. That means you got to condense almost 1,500 years
yeah.
of history, of conventional history, which granted, they got a lot of stuff messed up, but to condense all of that in like the last couple of hundred years, it's just not doable.
No.
Uh, yeah.
No, I
So
agree. I agree. I agree. I'm not. They call it revisionist history, don't they? Where you just revise everything and throw it all out the window. And I'm not there for that. The issue I think because it's known as the little season or the short season, as you said, it's just a time. You know, people imagine it. Well, it can't be any longer than 250 years because obviously, if 1,000 years is Christ's reign, then a season is a quarter of that, so it must be 250 years. But I've always said that's just a random number you've just pulled out your ass there. There's no reason why it should only be 250 years old. It could be any period of time. How long's a piece of string? If you want to know how long a short season is, it's as long as it takes to get that army together, that Gog and Magog, and surround the camp of saints. That could take as long as it takes, and we don't actually know how long a short season really is. And you know, from the perspective of God, I mean, 1,000 years is nothing. You know, that is a short time. It's a day. You know, so a short season could literally be we don't know 1,000, 1,500 years, as you're explaining here. And from what you're telling me, it seems like you're saying Christ reigned for 1,000 years from what we conventionally call 70 AD, which was the destruction of Jerusalem. And then once that was ended,
it
our
was
hit,
canceled by Satan.
yeah,
Satan canceled it.
yeah,
He picked it back up. He picked up the Roman Catholic Church, all of the history. He said the buildings were built by the Romans and the Greek. They
hmm.
built the aqueducts and all the rest of it. Bull crap.
So,
It's all crap.
but just to clarify, you're saying then only after the 1,000 year reign had ended did the church fathers appear, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's according to history, and they all acknowledged that the 1,000-year reign of Christ had come.
Yeah.
And I've got, in fact, I've got the church fathers right here.
Hmm.
Let me just pull this out. So here are these people, and I'm not going to say the names right, but Polyclops, 110 A.D.
Polycarp, is it Polycarp?
Right.
Yeah.
Justin Martyr, 150 A.D. He said the Jews had changed the Septuagint. The Jews teach. They took away many of the uh, scriptures, and they were changing stuff. And changed the translation from 70 elders and 240 BC. But he said it. Here's another one. Hippocrates, 2005. He also said they changed scriptures. He also believed that their early church came. Now, the Nicene Creed, some people believe that the Jesuits actually added that thy kingdom come, or that whatever, or Nicaea Creed.
Hmm.
Origen, he was 240 AD. He was arguing at the time with, I guess, the resurgence of the Jewish people at the time, um, uh, that that changed scriptures, and that Christ's kingdom have come. Euberus, Eusebius, 300 A.D. Christ ruled over the all the nations, quote unquote. Um, let's see. Uh, Book of the Martyrs, they acknowledged it. There's other things like the Geneva Bible of 1532
Yeah.
in the commentary on Luke. They said Christ's 1,000-year kingdom would come. So they were all in on it, Paul. They
Mhm.
they 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 were all, but they were the last ones to believe it. And so you ask, well, what happened? What ruptured Christianity, which could derail it? And now I'm going to jump just a little bit ahead in my notes because this is uh, pretty important. But I am going to jump back real quick. But I have to go to this because this is uh, well. Let me stick to where I'm at right now. So where was I?
Well,
Oh,
just talking about the church fathers, someone did ask a decent enough relevant question here. Obviously, we have the Orthodox Church as well, which went out into Russia, which is obviously a breakaway from the Catholic Church. It's not the same thing,
yeah, get the
and
Byzantine Empire for 1,000 years, right?
absolutely, yeah. So, what do you think all that kind of fits into all of this and that concept of the
I think
Orthodox
that's the,
Church?
I think that's the residual. I think the power of Christ's church was so powerful that when it actually ended, and we had this rupture event before we start to pick up along the conventional timeline of history. I think the church was so powerful that it just bust right on through and it was shining out everywhere. And
Hmm.
Satan's main thing to do was, number one, start wars, take advantage of the power vacuum, get one king to go after another king, start all these little kingdoms and all these little castles, and which made it hard to kill men creatures, by the way. In other
Hmm.
words, preserve life, all those walls. So Christ knew what he was doing. He goes, you know what? When I leave, these men creatures, they're so damn selfish. They're so greedy that it ain't good. Satan's going to have an easy time getting inside their head, especially when they're not acquainted with sin for like 1,000 years. Sin is
Hmm.
almost be like a virus. I'm going to get inside their head. Yeah, you can have your neighbor's wife. Lying ain't so bad. Well, why shouldn't I have his castle over there? I'm bigger than he is. So anyway, so that havoc started, and so these church fathers were all trying to pull together that initial havoc right after it, and
Yeah.
then that's where you get the church fathers. That's where you get it. So you say, well, what happened? Well, something really weird happened right after the church fathers, right around 500 AD, when all this other havoc was happening. Guess what? All of a sudden, we start finding out the catacombs.
Hmm.
I want you to get together.